Good morning. Today we're gonna start learning the MERN stack. MERN is a shorthand for MongoDB, Express, React, and Node. I don't know what is Node doing there because it's obvious that if you're using Express.js, then yeah, you're running it on Node. But anyway, today we're gonna build a simple application with client written in React that will be served using the Express.js server. Our client will be able to log into our server and access a secret endpoint, the protected endpoint where it needs to be authenticated using the JSON web token. And for now, for the sake of this tutorial, we will skip the MongoDB part. I will just hard code the user in the Express application. All the logic will basically stay the same, but it will allow us to focus on setting up the authentication and serving the React app. If you're interested in learning how to use MongoDB, then let me know in the comments and I will record another video about that. So here is the app we're building. The client is written in React and it handles all the routing. It has login and secret route. If we go to login, you will see the login form. If you go to the secret page, for now you will see only the title, secret, but we don't see any data. Now, if we go to login and enter the correct credentials, press login, and then go to secret, you will see all the user data exposed, because now we were authenticated and server returned this data. Let's see how to build this. First, I'm gonna run the Express generator to scaffold our app. npx express generator, and let's call our app MERN. Now let's go to the project folder, MERN, and then let's install a bunch of dependencies. Yarn add. First of all, we'll need to install the JSON web token. This package will allow us to create the JWT tokens from our data. JSON web token. Then we'll need to install Passport. This is a package that allows you to handle authentication in your applications. I recommend to not implement your own version of authentication mechanisms because it is quite complex and it's very likely that you will forget about some aspect and introduce vulnerability to your project. So better use existing solutions like Passport. On its own, Passport doesn't do much. It provides the platform for different strategies, and we're going to use two strategies in this app. First of all, we're going to use Passport JWT. It will handle the protected route secret that will serve the user information if the user is authenticated. So basically, it will take the JWT token from the authentication header, verify that it's valid, and then if it is, then we will serve the data to the user. Next, we'll also need to be able to authenticate using login and password. So we'll use another strategy that is called Passport local, and then open the project in the code editor. We can remove the views folder because the frontend will be handled by React, so remove the views. Now let's go to app.js. I'm gonna change all the vars to consts, and same for these two as well. And now let's add the missing imports. After the logger, let's import passport, const passport, equals require passport. Then we import the local strategy, const local strategy equals require passport local. Then we import the JWT strategy. Let's call it passport JWT equals require passport JWT. Now let's remove some code that we're not going to need. First of all, remove the users router and remove the users.js from the routes folder. Delete. Rename the routes index to routes API. Rename api.js. Make sure it's renamed in your app.js as well. Rename the constant to API router. We can remove the views related code. Now remove the app use users router and rename the URL for the API router. We renamed it to API router to be API. So all our API endpoints will start with API and then the name of the endpoint. We can remove the 404 error handling. And in our last middleware, instead of rendering the error template, as we disable the views handling, we will just send it as text. Send error message. Remove the create error. And now let's initialize our strategies. So first of all, I want to define a JWT strategy as a separate const equals passport JWT strategy. Then after I initialize the Express application, I'm gonna call app use passport initialize, and then I'm gonna define my strategies. First, let's define the JWT strategy. Passport use new JWT strategy. We need to pass a bunch of options to it. First of all, JWT from request. This option tells where should JWT strategy get the JWT token from. In our case, it will be the authentication header bearer token. So we use extract JWT from auth header as bearer token. Now we need to specify the JWT secret. In real application, you will store it in your .env or just in environment variables. Here, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just gonna hardcode it. But remember that in real application, you shouldn't do it. Secret or key, it will be JWT secret. And it's important that in real application, you use something more complex. Now, after we specified the options, we need to specify the callback that will handle the JWT token verification. It will get the JWT payload and the done callback. And before we write the code for this verification function, let's quickly go to JWT.io, and I will show you what is JWT token. So JWT token is a string with encoded data. As you can see, it is split in 3 parts using dots. Each part has its own meaning. So first section is the header. It tells what algorithm is used to encrypt the token and also the type of the token. So in our case, it's HS256 and the type of the token is JWT. Then goes the body or payload. It stores the data in your token. So you can have the user information, you can have any kind of payload basically that you need to pass between the client and the server. So you don't have to store anything in your session. This is why we didn't install anything related to session in our app, because all the data will be inside of our token. Basically, it is an object encoded as a string. And then the last part is the signature. It verifies that your token is legit. Now back to our application. So in this callback, we'll have to find the user with the matching ID, and if we found it, then return this user using the function done. Otherwise, we need to return an error that the token didn't match with any of the existing users. So let's do it. But before that, we'll need to hardcode the users. As I said, we will abstract the MongoDB part for now. So I'm just gonna say const user equals an object with ID 1, email, example at email.com, and password, just password. Now inside of the callback, we can check if user ID equals JWT payload, we will store the user there, and it will have the field ID. So if they are equal, then we return done, null, and user. Otherwise, we return done, null, and false. We also pass the message token not matched. Now let's handle the login password authentication. To do this, we will define another strategy, passport use new local strategy, and we also pass the options to it. In this case, it will be only one option, which will tell which field to use as a username. In our case, it will be email. User name field, email. And then we also pass a callback that will handle the authentication. This callback will receive email, password, and the done callback. Inside, we'll need to check if the user with the email and password exists. Again, in real application, you'll probably make a request to the database, fetch the user with the given email, and then verify that the password actually matches. In our case, we have the hard-coded user, so we'll do the following. If email equals user email and password equals user password, then we return done, null, and user. So you see that our JWT callback and our local strategy callback are somehow similar. In the case of JWT strategy, it automatically extracts the JWT token from the authentication header, bearer header, decrypts it using the secret. That should be secret and shouldn't be exposed in your repository. This is why it should be stored in the .env environment variables. Then after we parsed it, we get the payload. We can compare the user ID that is stored inside of the JWT token to the user that we found, and then we return this user. In the local strategy, we do kind of the same thing, but we get the email and password, and then we compare the email to our user's email and password to our user's password, and then we return the user if we found it. Otherwise, we return done null false, so the user wasn't found, and that's it. Now we need to define the API and the frontend. Let's first handle the React application. Go back to the console and generate a new React app. npx create React app client. After it's done, go back to the code editor, and inside of the client, we'll need to make the following changes. First of all, you'll need React Router DOM to handle the routing. Go to index.js and wrap your application into browser router. Next, go to app.js and make your layout look like this. Here we define a switch that will make sure that we render one router at a time. So if we show home, only the home is visible. If we show login, then only login, and secret, then only the secret component. And then define 3 routes. The root route, where we'll render our home component, login with the login component, and secret with the secret component. Define the component for each of the pages. Home component renders the home title and 2 links, login and secret. Login component renders the login form with email and password inputs, and when you click submit, it makes the post request to API login, which we will implement in a minute, and sends the email and password in the body payload. We specify the content type to be application JSON, and we encode our body as a JSON format. Then, after we got the response, we check if the status was 200, which means that our server processed the response correctly. Then we handle the response as a JSON, get the data, and we know that the server will respond with the token. We get this token from the data, and we save it into the local storage. It is arguable where should we store this token for our front-end application to be able to use it later. For now, for this example, we will just store it in the local storage. I plan to record another video about where to store this thing to be secure. In this example, it's enough that we store it in the local storage. And after we do it, we navigate back to the root route using the history object. Otherwise, we just raise an error. Next, inside of the secret component, where we try to handle the secret API that is protected using the token, we use the useEffect hook to trigger this code when the component is mounted. So when we visit this page, the useEffect triggers, we fetch the API secret endpoint, and we pass the header authorization. Remember how our JWT strategy is set up, that it looks for this JWT token in the authorization header bearer token. So we put the token that we were storing in the local storage as a bearer token in authorization header, and then after we made this request, we get the response, parse it as a JSON, we get the user information from it. We will set this up later, but we will send the user info from our server. We store it into the state of our component, and then we just render it using JSON stringify. We render our user as a string in our component. So this is how the client works. You don't have to worry too much, because I will attach the code to this video, so you will be able to just copy the client implementation, and then if you need to, you can base your code on top of it and add your own functionality. For now, let's make sure that we can serve it. Go back to app.js, and in the bottom of the file, after we define the API router, we'll need to serve our client. So we write app get all the routes except for the API request, response. We return response, send file, path, join, dir name, so it's current directory from which we serve the code, client, build, index.html. So we will serve the React client And on any request, we will just serve the index.html and then React will handle all the routing. That means that we also need to serve the client static files, CSS, JavaScript, and images. We do it using app, use, express, static middleware, and we pass path, join, dir name, client, build. That's it. Now we serve both client static files, JavaScript, CSS bundle. We serve the index.html on any request except for the API. And if we call the API, we will handle it using the API router. Let's define our API routes. We'll need to login that will authenticate our user and send the token to the client, and the secret that will check that the token is valid and then return the user information. Remove the root route, import password, const passport equals require passport, and also import JWT, const JWT equals require json web token. I'm gonna change the vars to consts. And now let's define our routes. Router, post, we handle the login post request. We get request, response, and next. And inside of this function, we will call passport authenticate with the local strategy. It will give us the error and the user. And we call this authenticate method with request, response, and next that we got in the middleware callback. Now, inside of the passport authenticate, it will handle the authentication for us using the logic that we described when we initialized our local strategy. So it will get the email and password from the request, pass them to this callback. We will verify that it matches with some of the users that we found in the database, or in our case with the hard-coded users data. And then it will pass it to this callback as a user argument, and we can handle it using our own custom logic. If error, then we return next with error. We just pass it through to the next middleware. If no error happened, but we didn't find the user, no user, that means that we got wrong email or password. So we return res send wrong email or password. And if everything is fine and we found the user, then we call request login with user, and we pass a callback there. Here we construct the body of our JWT token, const body equals ID, user ID, email, user email. I'm not going to send password because it's very sensitive information. And now we construct the token, JWT sign user body. And here we use the secret, JWT secret. This is the secret that we'll use to sign the JWT token, and it should match the JWT secret that we pass to decode the JWT token in our JWT strategy. In both cases, it's best if you get it from the environment variable. And finally, after we got the token, we send it to our client. Return res JSON token. Now, when the user will call API login, the passport authentication strategy, the local strategy, will parse the request, get the email and password from it, perform the logic that we defined in the local strategy when we initialized it, return the user that it found or the error. We will get this user and create the JSON web token from it, and then send it to the client as a JSON. In the client, we will get this token from the data that will parse as JSON, save it to local storage, and then use it on our secret page to send as authorization header, as a bearer. Now let's define the secret route in our API. Router get secret. Now first we need to make sure that we are authenticated, so we pass as a second middleware here passport authenticate strategy JWT, and we want it to not use session. Session false. If we are authenticated, it will send us to the next middleware that we defined here, request, response, and here we check if there is no user in the request object, request user none, then we response with JSON with username nobody, otherwise, which will be more likely in our case, we response with JSON containing request user. And that's it. Now we have API login and API secret, and we serve our React application. Now you need to go to the client, cd client, build the application, yarn build, and after you're done, get back to the server folder and run yarn start. Now you can go to the browser, go to the login route, log in using the example at email.com and password, log in, go to secret, and you will see the user information. If we open the developer tools and remove the token from the local storage, reload this page, you will see that we now cannot get any data from the server. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, ask me questions about this project in the comments, and also join my Discord server to pick the topics for the next videos. See you next time.